Hey everyone, welcome to Atlas Trucking. I'm Zach, and today we're going to discuss the elephant in many relationships, money. Before we jump into it, if you enjoy my videos, I'd be greatly appreciated if you give it a thumbs up and hit that little red subscribe button wherever it is. If you don't like them, leave me a comment. Let me know why. So, let me jump over to the main screen here. I came across this article in bold, and it kind of struck it because finances is kind of an interesting hobby of mine. So, let's check it out. So, talking about finances with a new boyfriend is super awkward, but here's why I'm glad I did it. So, start off. It says, I'm an independent woman, so we'll skip over that nonsense. And I make my own money. My customer service jobs certainly don't make me rich, but they've made me enough to get by. A few years ago, I started seeing a guy, and it turned into the most serious relationship I've ever had. This means that we had to talk about grown-up things like money, and while it was awkward, I'm really glad I did it. Okay, so yes, when you're in a committed relationship, eventually, especially as it progresses, you should start discussing about important things like, do you want kids? If so, how many kids do you want approximately? What kind of house do you want to get? Do you want to live in the city? Do you want to live in the country? And as part of that, you should discuss money, how you deal with money. Are you a spender or a saver? Are you, somebody who likes to save so you can spend? Do you like to invest? Things like that. You need that should come up. So let's see what her goal is. So money sure puts a strain on a lot of relationships. Yes, that is very true. If you don't, especially lack of money. I hated even thinking about money, let alone talking to my new boyfriend about it. Still, I knew it made sense to discuss it before we got more serious. So I don't know how long they've been dating at this point, but if this is early in the relationship, it's probably a little too early to have this discussion. Especially since I had big plans for my future. I wanted to travel. She continues. It was going to take a long time to save up, but I had a plan. Was he going to be a splurger or a saver? So understanding, and again, like I said, I don't know how far along they are in the relationship, but if it's been a few months, you probably should gauge whether or not the other person is somebody who likes to spend money or somebody who likes to save money. This is really important to figure out early on, because if both of you are spenders, you're going to have some major problems. Something's going to have to change. Probably both of you are going to have to adjust, because if you're both spending money, you're going to be broke constantly. Additionally, if you are a spender and the other is a saver, or vice versa, and you don't come up with a plan on how you're going to address the differences, then you're going to probably end up in a lot of fights. If you guys are both savers, no problems. You guys are going to have a ton of money sitting in the bank account, and you're never going to do anything with it because you're just going to keep saving it. But the other two situations do have some interesting caveats you have to work out. Saving is hard when you're working in a job barely above minimum wage. Disagree. It's really about your spending. So she said she wanted to go to Australia. Okay, so she wants to travel. She still lived with her parents and paid a very small amount in rent. So this kind of goes against her whole independent woman concept. If you're still living with your parents, you're not independent. It's one thing if you leave and then come back because of certain situations. It's another thing when you obviously have never left because you're in college and you're still living with your parents and they're taking care of pretty much all your expenses for you. So don't call yourself independent if you're still living off mom and dad. But moving on from that, it's obvious that she wants to save so that she can spend. So she is a spender. It's what it boils down to. Then she said, I talked to my boyfriend about traveling, and he said he wanted to travel too. Of course, you're in a new relationship. You say that you like some hobby. He's not going to say, oh, I hate that hobby, because then you disappear and no bedroom fun happens. So he was living on his own. I'm going to skip over that portion of it. He was living on his own. He had roommates, so he actually was independent. He was taking care of himself, even though he was going to college. He was taking care of his own finances, so he didn't have a whole lot of money to save because he was paying his own bills. Skipping over, so one red flag that I wanted to put down here is that she said that she did not want him to go to Australia with her. She wanted to go alone, and as we learn later on in the article, it's for about 6 months. So she wants to go to a foreign country for 6 months by herself. That is a huge red flag. Anytime a woman wants to travel to a foreign country by herself for that long on a pleasure trip, not a business trip, her boyfriend should be going, wait a minute, what's going on here? So this is where it gets really interesting. But what if my new boyfriend wanted a big house and lavish wedding? Obviously, guys don't care about the wedding. As long as you say I do, we don't care if it's in front of the Justice of the Peace or if it's in front of 5,000 people. Say I do, let's get to the honeymoon. That's what we care about. But moving on. I needed to know if he had savings or if he could save and what he would spend it on, as I couldn't ask him straight out how much money he earned and saved. That would make her a gold digger if she was worried about that. I decided to devise a game. We had bedroom fun first, naturally. Post-bedroom fun is always the best time, according to her, to have difficult conversations. The added level of relaxation really helps. This is completely wrong. The two worst times to discuss anything serious in a relationship are right before bedroom fun or right after bedroom fun. Right before, the guy will say anything to make sure that bedroom fun happens. Right after, all the blood is away from his brain, so he cannot think and have a coherent conversation about a serious topic because his brain is deprived of blood and oxygen. It's somewhere else. So having it those two times, the worst possible time. The best time to have this conversation, this is my wife and I actually had this conversation when we were dating over dinner, well outside of the time window of bedroom fun. When you're out, you're enjoying yourself, you got a couple drinks in you, and you can actually have some fun, play this kind of game. I don't like how she structured it and you'll see why here in a minute. The way that my wife and I structured it is what we do if we won the lottery. What would each of us do? So I told her what I would do, and she told me what she would do. So here, she switched it up, and she wanted him to guess what she would do. Now, the reason this is a problem is even though they just had bedroom fun, he would like bedroom fun to continue. In other words, he wants her to come back and watch more. So obviously, he's going to try and guess what she wants to do, and those things are going to be, obviously he knows that she wants to travel, and so he's going to say something along the lines of traveling, and he's going to try and stick in that vein and try and not go too far out of the weeds. And then when she guesses, he's going to make sure to pick things that line up with, not entirely, but closely enough that she's not going to go, oh my God, we're too different, and run for the hills. So the way she structured this game is a very poor way of engaging in the financial discussion because it's very closely tied to the whole bedroom fun aspect of things. And she realizes that when she sat next to each other cross-legged on the bed that her own game was totally anxiety-inducing. Yes, because he was trying to make sure that bedroom fun continued, and she was trying to figure out whether or not they were financially compatible. So he was trying to make sure that whatever his answers were going to fit that mold. And he fully saw through this whole charade that she was doing here. He guessed that I'd pick going to Australia. She opened the article with that. I imagine that she probably mentioned that several times in the first couple of weeks that they were dating. It doesn't take a genius to figure out, wow, she wants to go to Australia. So when she wins the lottery, she's going to go to Australia for a while. Then he did kind of plug some holes in her ego here. He thought that she would give some money to her parents, and apparently that wasn't on her list, so it made her feel guilty. That was kind of a nice dig for him to kind of throw her own game back at her. So when she guessed his three choices, he put traveling on there, helping his family, and a house with a big pool. I'm sorry, those were her guesses. She guessed traveling, helping his family, and a house with a big pool, and he was close. His third choice was actually to invest, which shows that he is thinking about the future. He wants to be able to continue having money come in so that they can do certain, things. She wants to save up for a goal, blow all that money, and then have to go back and save up for another goal. She is a spender. He is showing that he actually is a saver and investor, which will bode well for him. He's going to have to, if he stuck with her, he would have to deal with her spending problem and likely keeping the checkbook away from her. So she was glad that he didn't pick materialistic things. Obviously, his things were not materialistic at all. His thing was thinking about the future. And he didn't have savings, but it wasn't because he didn't want to save. And then she went to Australia for 6 months, and by the time he'd been given a promotion. And I'm assuming that after this they broke up, because then she has some other articles on this same site about how finding a new guy and breakups and whatnot. So I'm assuming that they didn't last to go to their trip to Southeast Asia. But I did find it interesting in this that she was trying to figure out his financial stability while also showing her financial instability. That said, this is a very important topic to have if you're in a long-term relationship. If you're in a short-term relationship or a fling or one-night stand, obviously this is completely irrelevant. You don't care because the person is not going to be around for it to have a lasting impact. However, for a long-term relationship, marriage, you need to have this discussion, preferably before you go down the aisle, because you need to make sure that you guys are on the same page before you end up going into divorce court because you weren't on the same page to start with. So, while I think she was close to the right path, her approach was a little off. So jumping over to kind of the guru of personal finance, Dave Ramsey, let's see what he has to say on the other. He has 4 main points. One is the level of the relationship dictates how much you should talk about it, and never talk about specifics. Speak generally. So basically, if you're the first few months, you don't really have to get specific. It's, hey, what would you do if you won the lottery? How would what would you, if you didn't have to worry about money, what would you do? Those kind of things. And then as you get more serious, then you can speak, more specifically about things. And he's not just talking about spending, but also savings, investing, planning for retirement, how much you want to give to charity, what type of charities you want to give to, things like that. All good things to talk about. And then he also mentions look for orange flags, specifically areas that you might have conflict, and make sure that you are able to discuss the conflict and come up with some sort of compromise. If neither of you are able to budge, those orange flags can quickly turn into red flags. And you want to limit the number of red flags, because too many red flags means that you're, again, going to line up in divorce court and have a whole series of financial difficulties because of that. So while I was doing the research for this, I also ran into this site, which I never heard of, so I don't know what Regain does typically, but they did have this article, and there's one thing in here, this part right here, that I completely disagree with. Not because I'm telling you to lie. So the part I disagree with says, tell the truth about how much money you make. Do not try and lie and act like you make more money than you do. First, they will find out, and it will be hard to justify that lie. You may attract some more people, but someone who loves you shouldn't make your income a deciding factor. On a dating site, it may be tempting to say that you make $100,000 a year when you barely make a quarter of that, but don't lie. Excuse me. My rule when dating was I never discussed how much I made with the girl I was dating. And the reason for this was simple. It's a lose-lose situation. You're either going to make too much, in which case they're going to be treating, they'll act like a gold digger, or you're going to make too little, in which case their hypergamy is going to set in, and the next guy that comes along making more, they're going to run to. Obviously, you have extremes, like a broke guy is not going to be worrying about making too much because he has no money, and Jeff Bezos is not going to be worried about making too little because he's the richest guy on the planet. Most of us will fall somewhere in between, but you never know where on that spectrum the girl will pitch you at with your income. So all they need to know is you have no debt and you can pay your bills and take care of yourself. Outside of that, don't give any specifics. I had a couple of girlfriends who were incredibly ticked off because I would not tell them exactly how much money I made. One of them in particular, she found out that my best friend knew how much money I made, but she didn't, and she went ballistic. I had a very small circle of people who knew how much money I made, and the reason for that was simple. In my case, I started working full-time at 19 in my field, so I was making a lot more than my peers, because a lot of them were still working their part-time jobs in college, and I was still, I was working my full-time job while I finished college, and had a salary that was significant. A lot of them were making much less than I was. So to avoid any issues with that, don't discuss your income, and don't lie about it. Don't make up a number, but just don't discuss it, period. Just avoid all of that drama. And then obviously the next point is don't date somebody just because they have a lot of money. That's, in an ideal world, that's great. We all know that that's not reality. There are women out there who are going to want to get with somebody who has a lot of money. I don't know of a single woman who would turn down a date with Jeff Bezos on the off chance that, they might be able to marry him, and even if they get divorced a couple years later, they come out with a couple billion. Finally, I ran into this article on Flare, which I believe is very similar to Bold in how they lean. And they were talking, this article talks about how discussing, or how millennials in particular, discussing your finances is sexy. And that it's becoming more and more popular for millennials, especially as they get into their 30s, to care about finances, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, it would have been better for them to start in their 20s, but better late than never. I agree. First of all, don't discuss it on a first date. It shouldn't be discussed until you're getting semi-serious, and don't talk specific numbers. And then, ladies, let's talk about the patriarchy. This whole section is a load of crap. So we're going to go through it here. Part of the reason that speaking about numbers can get uncomfortable is that women still are paid significantly less than their male counterparts, including their partners. It's a load of crap. It's been debunked over and over and over again. They still keep throwing it out there. These girl power advocates keep throwing it out there like it's true. It's not. As a hiring manager myself, I've seen it where women are making 20 or 30% more than the guys for doing the same job because of this perception. And it's not reality. But moving on. We've come a long way in the past 100 years, but we have so much further to go, and we still don't have pay equality. No, you have pay superiority in most cases. Morehouse says the pay disparity between heterosexual couples, and this can have an effect on your dating life. No, it can't. No guy is going to care how much money his girlfriend makes. This is the same problem that Tomi Lahren had in her rants, and I have another video where I'm going to discuss that further coming up probably in a couple days regarding her second video. But it does not matter if you make $10 a year or $10 million a year. To the guy, that's irrelevant. That is not what he's looking for. For girls looking for guys, that is completely on the table as something that they look for. The other way around is not. Guys don't care how much money you make. Don't care how successful you are in your career. And many times, it's actually to your detriment. You play into some important conversations from the get-go. Even when it comes to seemingly mundane things like splitting the bill for dinner, he may be making $20,000 more than you, even if you have the same job. Again, we've already discussed that. It's not reality. And Google and Yahoo actually did a study internally themselves and found that it was the reverse. The women were making more. So if you don't believe me, you can look up those studies. While it might be super aux a necessity, some seriously important conversations about the fact that a 50-50 bill split isn't actually equal. Basic economics. The price you pay, if you split the price, you paid equally. It's not the equal burden, it's the equal price. But regardless of that, here that they're arguing that the women should pay less. Look, I came from a chivalrous background, let's put it that way. I hold doors open, I paid the bills. All I wanted, and this is kind of one of my tests that I had for girls on first dates especially, you weren't going to pay the bill. I was going to pay the bill. I knew that going in. I asked you out, I'm going to pay the bill. However, when the waitress or waiter set down the bill, if you just sat there and assumed that I was going to pay it and didn't try and reach for it, I noticed that, and that was likely an indicator of whether or not you were going to get a second date. If you reached for it, I'd grab it first. You weren't going to pay for it, but I saw that you had the effort that you were going to pay for it, which, in my mind said, okay, well, at least she made the effort to show that she, would be willing to. Don't actually have to do it, but be willing to. It also means that you can't leave your purse in the car and then reach for it and go, oh crap, I left my purse in the car. You actually have to be able to follow through if you're going to do it. In conclusion, talking about finances is a good thing, but you want to start at a high level, work your way more down to more specific as you get more and more serious. Have fun with it early on in the relationship. Just, what would you do if you didn't have to worry about money? What would you do if you won the lottery? Things like that. But the red flag that you want to watch out for before you get too serious is, does she have a lot of debt? Or, and for girls, does he have a lot of debt? If you guys are both spenders, you may want to think about things. It is possible to shift from a spending mentality to a saving mentality, but a pivot point is required. So, for example, for me in my 20s, the pivot point was when I got really interested in finance and realized that if I had structured my finances better in my early 20s, I would be retired by the time I was 35. So if I was able to get my finances lined up, I wouldn't have to work anymore. That kind of pivot point where you shift your mentality is important, and understanding what their pivot point was so you can understand how they got to where they are is something you want to discuss. And that discussion can have as you're getting more and more serious. You don't have to bring that up early on, but that is something you want to keep in mind. So with that, hope everybody has a great night, and I'll see you next time.